Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see here on our channel, our website, or social media. Reach out to me directly, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Today, we may be discussing the most desirable variant of the FP Journe Chronomètre Résonance in its first series. Short of one of the subscription watches, this 38mm platinum model with white gold dial is extraordinary in its beauty, discretion, and it is exemplary of the most innovative watch of the early 2000s. This timepiece, with two movements in one case, is a dual time, but it's so much more than that. Let's talk about its basic dimensions. It's the discontinued 38mm case, 8.9mm thick. It is 45mm from lug to lug with a 20mm spacing between the lugs. Throw it on my 16cm circumference wrist, and it wears like a traditional men's dress complication. It's neither oversized nor undersized, as traditionally in the mid-20th century, men's dress watches would have been 33 to 36 millimeters, so at 38, it isn't petite, but it'll wear on a wrist as small as 13 centimeters in circumference and easily fit underneath any kind of a dress cuff. The watch includes a strap and platinum buckle to match, and as you can see, this right here is an FP Journe factory strap. It's of a more recent vintage than the watch. You can tell because it features the pull tab, easy removal spring bars, and alligator leather on both sides. Black, you can see it has a folded edge, a monotone stitch, small round scale on the bottom, which is more expensive and lasts longer than calfskin, and large rectangular scale semi-gloss in black on the top. A simple matching FP Journe pin buckle, and a case that is characteristically Journe with blended lugs. All of high polish, a domed bezel. You have the double dimple knurled crowns for the flyback as well as winding and setting, and you have a thin mid case defined by the overlapping lip of the case back and the bezel. Now the watch includes two dials, both in 12-hour format. This was present on the Résonance 1 and 2. The Résonance 1 was made from 2000 through mid-2004. It was, of course, the watch you see here with the balanced 12-12 dial, but also with the brass movement. From mid-2004 through 2009, the watch was essentially the same aesthetically, but it featured a gold movement. Afterwards, the asymmetrical dial with scrolling hours and minutes supplanted the original dial format. This is the original dial format with the brass movement. The dial itself is white gold, and you can see the characteristic FP Journe dial side bolts that were initially a controversial feature of his designs and eventually became so influential that almost everyone copied them. You'll also note that the bezels for the sub-registers, the hours, minutes, and seconds, they are steel and black polished. And then we have those lovely biomorphic tapered blue Journe hands for the hours, minutes, and the power reserve. Now, these are independently settable separate time zones, and I'll demonstrate how that works right now. You set one, and then by rolling in the opposite direction, you set the other. Now, obviously, they run independently, but they are coupled by resonance, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. You can also see that as I wind the watch, the power reserve indicator progresses towards 0, and you may wonder why is that, and that's because FP Journe was inspired by chronometry in the classical era of the 18th and 19th century, when deck clocks or marine chronometers were used aboard ship for navigation. They needed to be wound 24 hours apart, exactly 24 hours apart, so that they would run consistently. So it was more important to know how many hours since a full winding than to know how many hours remained in its runtime, and that's why this power reserve indicates 0 when fully wound. Power reserve is 42 hours for both sides of the watch. Now the resonance effect, which as with metronomes and pendulums, couples the two escapements together, it does require about 7 to 9 minutes to gain purchase, maybe 10 minutes at the most, which means even after you've set your time, your seconds hands might not be synchronized. Wait 7 to 10 minutes and then pull the flyback, synchronize, and everything will now be running. Synchronized on the back and synchronized on the front. A few things to talk about on this case back. First, let's talk about the case itself. You can see it features a stamped 04R. That's not the year the watch was made, that's the year the case was made, but it's usually pretty close to the date of manufacture of the watch, usually a few months apart at the most. The other thing you'll note is that that feature, which was discontinued in 2005, is matched by a double hallmark for both France and Switzerland. You can also see the large diamond-shaped maker's mark of Eleanor, a case maker outside of Paris that FP Journe used from his first pocket watch in 1983 through mid-2008 when he bought the company and moved it to Geneva as his case maker. So you see those double hallmarks and the Eleanor maker's mark, obviously discontinued. The movement, it is the brass movement, the caliber 1499, meaning 14 French lignes in diameter. In 1999, the year FP Journe started work on the movement. That's how Journe names his movements. You have 2 clicks, 2 ratchet wheels, 2 drivetrains, 2 escapements, 2 balances and 2 hairsprings, and there is no mechanical link between them. If you put pendulums or metronomes in proximity to each other, they will slowly synchronize and self-regulate. These 2 separate movements, beaten away at 21/6, free sprung, and regulated in 6 positions, will synchronize to each other. So ultimately, if the watch takes a blow, or if the watch takes some sort of hit to the wrist, vibration, concussion, what will actually happen is that one balance wheel will speed up the other if it slows down, or if one speeds up, the other will slow it down to keep them synchronized, which is why it is the chronomètre of Résonance. The watch is of extraordinary architecture, and you can see that the movement is materially different from the ultimate rose gold variant, as that would remove the visible clicks and the ratchet wheels, making this not just a discontinued movement of brass, but also a very different looking 1499 than what came next. If you look closely, you can see there is a gold screw and a rack. So that is the rack and pinion that the watchmaker uses to synchronize the resonance phenomenon. So you synchronize the balances by moving them apart, and a very small gap exists, and fine-tuning that gap is more of an art than a science. It is the means by which resonance is achieved in a wristwatch. If you love this watch, email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.